Hey there, did you know that the history of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and Mark Antony is actually in Daniel chapter 11? In this video, we look at it. Hey there, and welcome once again to another video by Zion's Watch and Media, a channel where we talk about things like health, history, and the Bible. Alright, so we are now on to our second part in Daniel chapter 11 from where we left off. And in our last video, we saw the struggle that was going on between the kingdom of the north, Syria, and the kingdom of the south, Egypt. And towards the end, we started to see the rise of a new power coming up, Rome. And in this video, we continue from where we left off, verse 16. But he, Rome, that cometh against him, Syria, shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. So the Roman power was to come against Syria, and none would be able to stand before him. Rome conquered Syria in 65 BC, and this verse also says that they stood in the glorious land. This is speaking of Judea. Rome conquered Judea in 63 BC. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and the upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her. But she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. Rome wanted to conquer the whole world, but Egypt was the last territory still standing in its way. And in all of this, there would be this daughter of women who would be corrupted. This is speaking about the famous Cleopatra of Egypt. Now, to understand all this, we have to go back to 51 BC. In this year, the ruler of Egypt, Ptolemy XII, died, and left his kingdom to his oldest daughter and son, Cleopatra VII and Ptolemy XIII. And it was decided that these two should marry each other and reign together. Now, since they were so young, they were placed under the guardianship of a Roman statesman named Pompey. But soon afterwards, an issue broke out between Pompey and Julius Caesar, which led to the Battle of Pharsalus. In this battle, Pompey was defeated and fled to Egypt, with Julius Caesar chasing after him. But upon reaching Egypt, Ptolemy had Pompey killed. Because of this, Caesar now took the role of guardian over Ptolemy and Cleopatra. Now in Egypt, Julius Caesar saw that things were in commotion between Ptolemy and Cleopatra. The reason for this was because Cleopatra had been exiled and her share in the government had been taken away from her. Therefore, Caesar decided to settle the case. Now Cleopatra, knowing of Julius Caesar's arrival, decided to influence him. And hearing that he had a liking of women, she secretly wrapped herself up in a carpet and delivered it to Caesar's room one night as a present. This led to Cleopatra becoming Caesar's mistress and the mother of his son. Soon after this, Caesar restored Cleopatra back to power and decided that she and Ptolemy were to rule together. Now, the one who had been responsible for expelling Cleopatra was the chief minister of Egypt, Ponthinus, and he now feared her return. Because of this, he instigated jealousy against Caesar, saying that Caesar planned for Cleopatra to take control of all of Egypt. A civil war soon broke out between the Egyptians and Caesar, and it was in this war that Caesar burned the Egyptian ships, and with some of them being near the city, some buildings caught on fire, including the famous library of Alexandria, causing it to be destroyed. Now, in this war, Caesar needed reinforcements. Thus, a man by the name of Antipater, the Edoman, along with a group of 3,000 Jewish soldiers, came to help him. But they had a problem, for there were these two territories controlled by Egyptian Jews, Onion and Memphis, blocking their path. Thankfully to Caesar, though, these Egyptian Jews sided with Caesar's reinforcements and gave them passage and provisions. These reinforcements were crucial for Caesar to win this war. Thus, just like the prophecy said, the upright ones, or the Jews, were with Rome. But she, Cleopatra, would not stand on his side and neither before him. This can mean that either Cleopatra was not truly loyal to Caesar or Rome, but was just in it for her own political motives. It can also be referencing to the fact that when Julius Caesar died, she turned her affections to Mark Antony, who was the enemy of Caesar's son and successor, Octavian. And these two, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, would fight against Rome and Octavian in the Battle of Actium. In this battle, though, Octavian would be the victor, thus placing Egypt fully under the control of Rome in 47 BC, making Rome the world ruling power. Now, continuing. After this he shall turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. This is referring back to the time of Julius Caesar. A war in Asia Minor broke out, which took him away from Egypt. In this, Caesar defeated Pharnaces, the king of Cimmerian Bosporus, and later he would defeat the remainder of Pompey's rebel groups on the coastline of Africa and Spain. And then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Julius Caesar again would return to Rome, but he would stumble and fall suddenly. In other words, he would suffer a quick and inglorious death. He was murdered by his own men in 44 BC. Verse 20. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes, in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. After Julius Caesar, his adopted son, Augustus Octavian, would take the throne, and he would be a raiser of taxes. The Bible speaks of him in Luke chapter 2, verse 1. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus, that all the world should be taxed. Now Octavian would reign during the glory of the Roman kingdom. It is known as the Pax Romana, or the reign of peace. In a few days, though, he would die, not in battle, but peacefully in his bed, in AD 14. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peacefully, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Tiberias Caesar would succeed Octavian. His was a vile character, though. He was one who freely indulged in his sexual passions. The Bible also says of him that he would not be given the honor of the kingdom. This can refer to either two things. Either one, the fact that Tiberius was unpopular with the people, or two, that he was originally not in line to receive the throne because he was only the stepson of Octavian and not his true son. The Bible said that he would come in peacefully, though, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Tiberius' ascent to the throne was a peaceful process. In the beginning, though, he gave the appearance that he did not want the position. It was due to the flatteries of the Roman Senate that he eventually took it. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overthrown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. The arms spoken of here signify military strength. Tiberius was a successful military leader and had great success fighting in Germany. The second half of the verse refers to Christ, actually, who is the prince of the covenant, who lived during the reign of Tiberius. Christ will be broken by him, for Christ died by the orders of a Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, who was the subject of Tiberius. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with the small people. This verse takes us back in time to when Rome was still small, and made a compact or an agreement with the small people, the Jews. What happened was the Jews were being oppressed by the Syrians and requested help from Rome. The Jews would enter into a league with the Romans for protection in 161 BC. Verse 24. He shall enter peacefully even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches. Yea, he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. Nations before generally conquered with force, but Rome would now conquer peacefully. Kings ended up giving their kingdoms to Rome for protection. In this way, Rome grew. And Rome would do this and have power for a time, the verse said. Some believe that this time here is symbolic of a prophetic time, and that it applies from when Rome gained world control after defeating Egypt in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. So if we take a time, which is 360 years in Bible prophecy, and add that to 31 BC, that brings us to the year 330 AD, when Constantine changed the capital of the empire from Rome to Constantinople, and Rome was stripped of its prestige and honor. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. This here brings us back to a war between Rome and the king of the south, Egypt. And the war that is spoken about here is the Battle of Actium of 31 BC that we covered before briefly. But now I want to give you a few more details on how this actually came about. In Rome, a government known as the Second Triumvirate was formed with three individuals, Mark Antony, Augustus Octavian, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Now, Mark Antony would become the brother-in-law to Augustus Octavian by marrying his sister Octavia. But later, Mark Antony would fall in love with Cleopatra of Egypt. This led Antony to support the Egyptians and reject and divorce his wife, Octavia. Because of this, Augustus Octavian led his forces in war against Egypt. Now, by this time, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus had been removed from the government. So the winner of this war between Octavian, Mark Antony, and Cleopatra would actually possess the whole world. The Battle of Actium was fought on September the 2nd, 31 BC. In this battle, though, Cleopatra would flee, and Mark Antony, seeing this, would give up and follow after her. Thus, Egypt would lose the battle, giving Rome world dominion. Yea, they that feed on the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. Some interpret this verse to the fall of Mark Antony. After running away from the battle to follow Cleopatra, Mark Antony's soldiers would later leave him and join the side of Octavian. Now, Mark Antony would later commit suicide. Now, after this, Mark Antony would commit suicide, but not only him, for Cleopatra, realizing that she would not be able to influence Octavian, decided to commit suicide as well by allowing herself to be bitten by a poisonous snake. At the death of Cleopatra, the dynasty of the Ptolemies was ended, and all of Egypt was given to Rome. And both of these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. These kings are referring to the relationship between Mark Antony and Augustus Octavian. They would be at one table or appear to support each other outwardly, but in reality lies would be spoken. In other words, each party would be interested in themselves. Now the verse said that this would not prosper, and it did not, for the union by marriage with Mark Antony and Octavian's sister Octavia had totally failed. Afterwards the split came, followed by the Battle of Actium, where Octavian was the victor. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits, and shall return to his own land. Octavian would turn from his conquest in Egypt back to Rome with great riches, so much that it would actually shift the economy, and he celebrated his victory in a 3-day triumph. Now the verse also said that his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. Next, Rome would set its heart against the holy covenant and do exploits. This is referring to the oppression towards both the Christians and Jews, and it refers especially to the destruction of Judea. Under the Emperor Vespasian, the Romans invaded Judea and took the territories that had rejected Christ: Galilee, Chorasan, Bethsaida, and Capernaum. Then in 70 AD, Titus, the Roman general, besieged Jerusalem, causing a terrible famine to happen. It got so bad that women began eating their own children. Jerusalem was destroyed in this year, along with its temple being destroyed by fire, fulfilling Christ's prediction in Matthew 24 verse 2. There shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now Titus wanted to save the temple and put out the flames, but he couldn't. But he was able to save some of the furniture from it. These were the candlestick, the table of showbread, and the volume of the law, which was wrapped up in golden tissue. And out of these, the candlestick and the table of showbread will later be placed in Vespasian's temple of peace. This was the great exploit that Rome had performed. Then it returned back into its own land. Verse 29. At the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. The time appointed here is referring to the prophetic time that we mentioned earlier in verse 24 of 360 years, when the capital of the empire was moved from Rome to Constantinople. At this time, Rome came not actually to the south, Egypt, but simply towards it in that direction. And it would come not as the former in the battle of Actium, or in the latter, the conquest in Judea, but instead it came to move the capital, a political shift. Verse 30. For the ships of Shittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. The ships of Shittim would come against Rome. This is believed to be referring to the ships of the Mediterranean coastlines near the famous city of Carthage. Under the leadership of the Vandal king Genseric, the ships of Shittim assaulted Rome during his reign from 428 to 477 AD. And Rome would be grieved by him, for Genseric would sack and plunder Rome in 455 AD. The Emperor of Rome, Majorian, would try to defeat him in 460 AD, but would fail. The verse also said that Rome would have indignation against the Holy Covenant. In other words, Rome would attack the Holy Covenant, which according to Hebrews chapter 10, verses 16 to 17, is God's law being written in our mind and in our hearts. This would be done specifically by Papal Rome, who was on the rise. To do away with God's covenant, the church would suppress the scriptures, exalt traditions, and do away with God's law. In 533 AD, Emperor Justinian would declare the Pope to be the head of all churches and the corrector of heretics. And with this political power, the Bishop of Rome would attack the Holy Scriptures and anyone who would not submit to his authority. In this, the rulers of Rome had intelligence or conspired with the Papal Church who had forsaken the covenant. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. The first part of this verse is speaking of a power that would receive arms or military strength, and then would go on to pollute something known as the sanctuary of strength, which is a symbol of Rome. And this power that would receive arms and pollute it can be referencing one or two things. Either first, it can be a reference to the barbarian tribes, the Vandals and the Goths, who invaded Rome, the sanctuary of strength, sacked it, and destroyed the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. The power spoken here could also be a reference to the Papacy, who would receive military strength in 508 AD from Clovis, the king of the Franks. And if this power does represent the Papacy, then the polluting of the sanctuary can be a reference back to Constantine, who was the first papal emperor when he moved the capital of the empire from Rome to Constantinople, thus polluting or degrading Rome. The verse also said that they shall take away the daily sacrifice and shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. The daily is referring back to the pagan religion of Rome. The papacy with its new military power removed this paganism and in its place set up the abomination that maketh desolate as the world ruling power in 538 AD, a system of church and state, the papacy itself. Verse 32, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. There would be a people against the covenant, God's law being put into our mind and written in our hearts, and this group will become more corrupted by the flatteries of the Pope. This would be done through things like indulgences, where one was promised eternal life even if they were living in sin, if they simply paid for it. Also, there were the church's traditions and teachings on salvation by works. But at the same time, there would be a group of faithful Christians who would heroically spread the truth. These would be the Waldensians, the Albigenses, and the Huguenots. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall, by sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. A long period in which the true Christian church would be persecuted is here brought to view. And here we see the four ways in which the papacy would attack. The sword, by murder; the flame, burnings at the stake; captivity, which is imprisonment; and spoil, the confiscation of property. And this would continue for many days. This is a clear reference to the 1260-year prophecy found in Daniel chapter 7 of papal supremacy. Verse 34. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen or helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. When the Protestant Reformation came on the scene, led out by Martin Luther, The church was helped by the German states, who supported their cause and protected the reformers from papal persecution. But this verse tells us that people would also cleave to the Reformation through flatteries. In other words, they would embrace the faith through cheap motives. Verse 35. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge them, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. Some of them of understanding, or the faithful, would fall, be tried, purged, and made white. In other words, the spirit of persecution would continue even after the Reformation, but it would be a less intense persecution. We see this in the case of England especially, when at times the country leaned either in the Protestant or Catholic direction, depending on who was the ruling monarch at that time. Many of us have heard of the Catholic English Queen, Bloody Mary, who slaughtered multitudes of Protestant Christians. Now this persecution would continue until the time of 1798, when the papacy finally lost its temporal power. Alright, so there it is. We have just gone through the history of Rome in part 2 on our study of Daniel chapter 11. Now I hope that you see from this video very clearly that the events of history in our world were predicted in the Bible hundreds of years in advance, so that we as God's people could be aware of where we are in the stream of time, and so that we would not be caught off guard. God's word can be trusted. Will you put your trust in it? I pray that you will. Now, if you like this video and you want to learn more, be sure to subscribe below and to click on the bell for notifications to all of our newest videos, and we will see you in the next one. Until next time.